In this lesson, we are going to add a route for viewing a single discussion, and we're also going to make some really cool design improvements in our application. So the first thing I want to do is I want to move this button right here. Instead of add discussion here, I'm going to add it at the top of our navigation. So I'm going to go to my discussions list and delete this from here, and then also to my create or my home.blade.php. I'm just also going to delete this from here. Okay, and then in the layouts file, which is the app.blade.php, right here I'm going to have a card where I'll put the unordered list. So here I'm going to have a .card, and then there I'm going to have a card header, and this card header is going to say channels, and the card body is going to have my unordered list. But at the top of the card right here, I'm going to have an a.button info, and this is going to route to the page for all discussion or creating a discussion. Okay, so discussion.create. Okay, and here I'm just going to say create discussion, or that could be add. And if I refresh, great, you can see that button right here. But we want to give that button some more styling, like a margin Y of 2, so that it has a margin. And then we want to span it all through the width of the container. So what we could do is we could give it a style width of 100%. Refresh, great. And then while I'm here, I'm just going to give this a color of white, so that the text inside is white. Awesome. So that's our add discussion button. We have a list of channels right here. Next thing I want to do is I want to change this to discussions instead of discussion. Okay, and I think that was a typo from my part right here. So this should be discussions. Okay, so I just prefer it to be discussions. And then to also fix that, we have to make sure in our discussions controller we mark this as discussions.index. Okay, and I think that should be fine. So if I say discussions, we're good. If I go right here, we have discussion.store. It's supposed to be discussions. So if I come to my create.blade.php just to fix that, refresh, awesome. So we're fine. Now, the next thing I want to do is in the discussions view, I want to display the name of the person that posted this discussion and then a button to actually view the discussion. So I'm going to come to the index.blade, and what I'm going to do is this card, the card header, is going to have some HTML instead of just the title. So first we're going to have an image, and this is going to be the user or the avatar of the user who posted it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to install the Gravatar library. So composer require, and I think I forgot the name of the Laravel Gravatar library. So I'm just going to search for that, and it's a library by Thomas Wellstone. So I'm just going to copy that, and then what we could do is go to our composer.json and include it right there. Okay, want to make sure you have all the quotes correctly. And then we can run composer update. And guys, the reason why we do this is just so that we don't waste too much time on avatars and stuff like that. If you want to have avatars, then we've covered how to upload files in Laravel. It's really easy. You can go ahead and implement the functionality for users to upload their own avatars, and then you display in the views. Okay, but in this case, we're just going to accelerate everything with Gravatars. Okay, so now that the Gravatar package has been installed and registered, I think it's safe for us to just go to our home.blade.php, I think, right here. Okay, awesome. So where we have our list, and then use Gravatar source, and then pass in the discussion owner. So how do we get the owner of a discussion? We just need to set up a relationship. So in the discussion model, we can have public function user, and this is simply going to return this belongs to the user class. Okay, so here we can do source, and then we say user email, discussion user email, like that. Okay, so we reference the relationship, then get the user's email of the person that created this discussion. So if I come back here, close this out, refresh, you can see we have my gravatar right there, since I'm the one who created the discussion. But what I want to show you is, what if we wanted to call this author? Okay, can we come right here and say discussion author email? Let's see what happens. Laravel tells us that cannot read property email of known object. And remember the convention, because the convention has to be user, and what Laravel is going to do is get this user and then find a field in the discussions table called user ID. But what if we wanted to use author? What we can do is, the second argument right here is the name of the foreign key. So in this case, we're going to make sure that we say the foreign key is user ID. Okay, and now if we refresh, great, you can see we have the author right there. Awesome. So I'm just going to give this a width of 40 pixels and a height of 40 pixels also. And if I refresh, and I'm also going to give this a style of border radius 50%. Refresh. Awesome, it's perfectly round. And then I want to display the author's name just beside, so we can know the name of the author. So I'm just going to say, I'm just going to add this in a span so we can style it. And this is going to be discussion author name. Refresh, and great, you can see the discussion author name right there. So I'm just going to change this to strong so that it's bold. And then we want to give this a class of margin left of 2. Refresh, great, you can see it's shifted to the left, or to the right actually. Now what we want to do is, we want to add a button right here that says view, so that we can click on that to view the discussion. So what I want to do is, I want to use a div of display flex, and I'm going to have justify content space between. And I'm not so sure about this class name. I think it's justify space between, but let's see what happens. And then here, I'm going to have a div, which is going to be the first flex child. And this is going to be where we have the user's details. And then I'm going to have another div, which is going to float to the end. And this is going to have an a.button success button very small. And this is going to say view conversation. So if I refresh, great. So I think that class didn't work. What I want to do is try this out. And this is how I debug CSS, guys. So I want to try justify space between. That didn't work too. So the last resort is to go to the Bootstrap documentation, get started, search for flex, and you can see it says justify content between. That's the correct class name. Okay, so let's come here and try that. So content between, awesome. So now you can see the button is floated to the end. So we're just going to come here and make sure this is justify content between. Okay, so if I refresh this page right now, everything is good. So when the user clicks on this button, they should actually view a single discussion. So to do that, we need to pass in a route to view a single discussion right here. Okay, so I'm going to say route discussions.show, and I'll pass in discussion slug right here. Okay, and let me show you what this does. If I view page source, or actually let me just view page source right here and then scroll right down to where we have that link, you can see that we have the slug of the discussion and not the ID. And this is really good for search engine optimization, and it's very readable when someone visits the discussion or forum. So right here, when the user clicks on this button, we need to go to the show and find this specific discussion. So let me just show you right here in the discussion controller. This is the show method. What we get is the ID or the slug in this case, but we want to use route model binding. So I'm just going to say discussion, and we're going to return a view, or let's actually die dump the discussion. Okay, so if I refresh right now, we have a 404 because we are passing the slug and not the ID. But what we want to do is tell Laravel to actually find the discussion from the database using the slug. So we'll go to the discussion model and we are going to add a method, public function get route key name. And this is a method that we can use to override what Laravel uses in route model binding. So here we're going to return slug. And we are saying during route model binding, Laravel should use the slug to find the discussion instead of the ID. So if we refresh right now, you can see we have the discussion fetched from the database. The next thing we want to do is in the index.blade.php for the list of discussions, we don't want to have a body right here. What we just want to have is the title. So here, where we have the card body, I'm just going to display the discussion title. So this is going to be like a list of discussions. Let me just go back. And then we're going to have a page to view the details of that discussion. Okay, so you can see the name, and then when you click on view, it's going to show you the details of the discussion. So just before we end the lesson, I'm just going to add a show.blade.php, and here I'm just going to copy the contents of the home, and then in the show I'm just going to paste them right there. And then this is pretty much going to be exactly like the one we have in the index. Let me show you. You can see right here we have the card header and then this. So I'm going to copy this and would actually extract some of this into a partial so you don't have too much duplication. But in the show, we're going to have exactly the same thing like this. But then here, we're going to have the title, and then we're going to have maybe an HR, and then we're going to have the content. So discussion content like that. Let me show you what this gives us. So I'm going to come to my discussions controller, make sure I return the view for discussions.show, and then I pass an array with a discussion variable, and this is going to be discussion found from the database. Okay, so if I refresh, great, you can see we have the title right here, and then we have the content description, which means that if we come to all discussions, so let me just come back to the discussions page, you can see we have just the title. And then if we come to view discussions, we can see the details of this conversation, but the header right here is always the same. So what we want to do is extract that into a partial so that we have everything segmented correctly. So here I'm going to have partials, and then here I'm going to have discussion header.blade.php. Okay, so in my discussions show.blade.php, I'm going to extract the header completely. So here I'm going to cut out and include partials.discussion header. Okay, and in the discussion header, I'll just paste that partial right there. And then I'm also going to go to my index.blade.php, which is where I have a list of all discussions, and I'm going to include the discussion header. So here I'm going to include partials.discussion header. Okay, so if I refresh, everything is fine. If I go back to the discussions page, everything is still fine. Okay, but right now we don't have that duplication anymore. So in the discussion page, which is the index right here, what I want to do is make this title a little more obvious. Okay, so you can see the name right here is strong, but the title is not. So I'm just going to wrap this in some strong tags, and if I refresh, you can see it's also strong. And then I want to give this a class of text center that should centralize it, and probably not want to use a div. So let me just have a div.text center, and that should centralize it, right? Awesome. So we just centralize the contents right there. So I also want to come to the final one, which is the show, and also make sure the title has the same treatment. So I'm gonna have a text center, and then I'm gonna have strong tags, and I'll paste that there. And then finally, I want to make sure the author's name is not too bold, so I'm just gonna have a P right here, and I'm gonna pass in a font weight bold class. And if I refresh, the paragraph gives it a break-in. Let's use a span. Okay, refresh. Okay, so it's still too bold, no merit. Anyways, so we're just gonna leave it at that. Okay, so I've done my best when it comes to the design. So if we view our conversation, you can see the title right there, and then we have the horizontal line that shows the contents of the discussion. Okay, in the very next lesson, we are gonna add the functionality for replying to a conversation. Okay,